There is something that many people often do not realize until they or their loved ones enter old age. Decline does not come from a big event, but from small, slow, but continuous changes. The age of 80 is not a sudden milestone that makes people weak, but a time when the things that once gave life began to quietly disappear. Mr. Walter, 82 years old, used to be a disciplined, strong, and orderly construction engineer. After retiring, he thought he would enjoy a peaceful old age. But just a few years later, he began to feel sluggish, lost motivation, and gradually no longer recognized his former self. There was no serious illness diagnosed, no major events occurred, just the little things in daily life, emotions and relationships were silently lost. And it was that loss that made him older, not only in age, but also in spirit. Mr. Walter's story is not uncommon. Many people after age 80 go through a similar fading process, even though they previously lived healthy, independent, and lucid lives. In the next section, we will explore 5 reasons that are rarely mentioned, but have a profound impact on the longevity and quality of life of the elderly. Thereby, you can recognize the signs that are present in your own life or that of your loved ones, and start making timely adjustments while you still can. The first reason why Mr. Walter began to lose his vitality after the age of 80 was the gradual loss of purpose in living every day. Not big ambitions or profound philosophies about life, but very small, simple things, repeated every day, but enough to make a person feel that they are still needed. Previously, Mr. Walter lived by schedule and always started his day with specific tasks: cleaning the bookshelf, watching new technical news like an old professional habit, jotting down a few lines in a leather notebook that was always placed next to the teapot. He also has a schedule to call his grandson every Tuesday morning, or stand on the porch to water the plants when the sun is not too hot. Those seemingly trivial things are actually the framework that keeps his day in shape. But then, little by little, those things fell away. The children grow up, get busier, and the calls become less frequent. Knee health makes him afraid to stand for long periods of time. He asks someone else to water the plants in his garden for convenience. The notebook was also gradually forgotten on the top of the cabinet. The morning became quiet. No more alarms, no more expectations. He started waking up late, no need to rush. Then there were times when he stayed in bed for an extra hour just because there was no reason to get up early. And with that, everything else subsides. The taste becomes duller, the memory fades, the eyes become less bright. It was only when he happened to chat with a young neighbor who was studying architecture and was asked for his opinion on a house foundation design that he suddenly realized he could still contribute, even if it was just a few suggestions. That boy then often stopped by to ask more questions, and Mr. Walter began to get excited again. Every time someone asked about his old experiences, his eyes lit up and his voice became firmer. He regained the habit of writing notes, reviewing old documents, and creating a regular schedule for himself like before. Turns out what he lacked was not health, but something that made him feel like he was still useful, still here for some reason. A reason to wake up early. Someone needs me. And sometimes that's enough for the heart to keep wanting to beat every day. The second reason for Mr. Walter's silent decline is the loss of small social connections, which many people do not realize are important until they are no longer present. In the past, Mr. Walter had the habit of going to the coffee shop across the street every morning, where he ordered a glass of black ice without sugar and sat at a table next to the glass window, where he could see the flow of people passing by. He wasn't particularly close to anyone, but there were familiar faces that he still nodded to. Sometimes a handshake, sometimes just a short conversation with the young waiter, who always remembered he didn't drink sugar. Those interactions are so small that others may not notice them, but they are the invisible threads connecting him to life. Then after the age of 80, he thought he should live more quietly. He started making his own coffee at home, sitting on the porch to enjoy the so-called peaceful retirement, but peace without human warmth can easily turn into silence. Gradually, he no longer greeted anyone, nor did anyone greet him. A new neighbor moved in, whose name he didn't even bother to know. The morning laughter was replaced by the ticking of the kitchen clock. He didn't feel clearly sad. He just found himself becoming blurred, as if he was no longer part of the rhythm of life out there. What few people know is that those seemingly innocuous connections are actually keeping the human brain activated, emotions regulated, and the body feeling like it belongs to a community. When those connections are lost, even if it's just a greeting to the garbage man or a nod to the postman, the body will receive signals that it is gradually withdrawing from life. One morning, Mr. Walter decided to walk back to his old shop. The young waiter had now changed to another girl, but when he walked in, there was an older customer who nodded to greet him as if meeting someone familiar. That feeling warmed his heart more than the cup of coffee in his hand, and he realized the connection doesn't have to be deep, it just needs to be even. As long as every day we know that we are still seen and recognized as living with others, we will not feel lost in our own home. Among the things that weaken people after the age of 80, perhaps none is more silent and persistent than a loss that has never been fully acknowledged. For Mr. Walter, that loss took the form of Mrs. Evelyn, his wife who had accompanied him for more than half a century, from the days when they were both students at technical school, to the weekend afternoons walking around the park with hands that were no longer holding as tightly as before, but still found each other in silence. She passed away peacefully, without a long illness, without pain, just one night of sleep, and then not waking up again. Relatives came to pay their respects, friends consoled them, and children and grandchildren took care of the funeral carefully. Mr. Walter did not cry. He just nodded, said thank you, and quietly arranged her belongings like an engineer, carefully tidying up a project after completion. But inside, he knew there was something that had never been touched before. After the funeral, people returned to their lives. The house became quieter, meals were absent, and in the evening, there was no longer the sound of her typing on the keyboard as she wrote in her diary like every night. He still talks to others, still goes out for a walk, still smiles softly when someone tells a funny story. But there were nights when he stayed up late just to look at an empty chair. There were mornings when he brewed 2 cups of tea and then suddenly remembered he was alone. That pain did not burst or make a sound, but settled down like a fine layer of dust, evenly covering every corner of the soul. And like all things repressed, it began to gnaw at him from the inside. He lost weight, lost appetite, had intermittent sleep, and his memory gradually deteriorated for unknown reasons. It wasn't until one time, during a small gathering with old friends of the same age, he heard someone talk about the emptiness of losing his wife, and for the first time, he felt a lump in his throat. After that meeting, he sat in the car for a long time, and then let the tears flow down as if his body could finally breathe. Not because he was weak, but because he had not allowed himself pain for too long. Emotions, if not expressed, if not lived honestly, will silently accumulate into illness, fatigue, and the feeling of not being yourself. And the magical thing was, when he began to tell stories about Evelyn to a niece, about the way she laughed every time he argued, about the cakes she liked to make in the winter, he felt like she was alive again somewhere in those stories. No one can replace the person who has died, but when you are allowed to remember, speak, and listen, the pain is no longer a burden. It becomes a tender part of memory, and most importantly, it reopens an emotional door that has been closed for too long. One of the changes that Mr. Walter did not realize until it silently eroded his health was a sleep disorder, stemming not from age, but from the fact that his body had lost the natural circadian rhythm it had followed all his life. Previously, he was someone who always got up early, accustomed to the morning sunlight shining through the kitchen window while he was pouring boiling water into the teapot. At night, he does not stay up late because he is used to going to bed early since his construction days. But after retirement, when the rhythm of life was no longer bound by an alarm clock, he began to stay up later, stay in bed longer, and in the evening turn on the TV until late, sometimes just to have the sound of people in the empty space. In winter, he hardly left the house. The curtains were closed. Daylight became a luxury that he gradually forgot. He did not know that those small changes had a big impact on the nervous system and internal biological clock. The body no longer knows when it's really morning and when it's night when it needs to rest. Sometimes he sleeps for many hours during the day, but still feels tired in the morning. Sometimes he tossed and turned until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, even though he had nothing clear to worry about. And from those sleepless nights, his memory began to become confused, his mood changed easily, and his resistance weakened without any specific explanation. It wasn't until a routine examination, when the doctor asked him if he was regularly exposed to natural light, that he was startled. That simple suggestion, go outside for about 15 minutes in the morning and reduce artificial light at least an hour before bed, may seem small, but within just a few weeks he began sleeping deeper, waking up more alert, and his mind less foggy. The bedroom was also adjusted, with less blue light from the TV, and the curtains were opened early to let sunlight in at the beginning of the day. He realized that the body not only needs food or medicine, but also needs light at the right time as a signal to help the entire system work synchronously. When light comes on time, melatonin, the hormone that helps you sleep deeply, is secreted regularly. When the night returns to its true meaning, the mind has the opportunity to repair and recover. For Mr. Walter, sleep is no longer a struggle in the middle of the night, but becomes a part of the rhythm of life returning to order. And from there, he understood that daytime alertness does not start with morning coffee, but from the first light the body receives after opening its eyes. The final reason in the series of things that made Mr. Walter gradually lose his vitality after the age of 80 stems from what everyone thinks is wise: caution. One afternoon after a light rain, while walking home from a familiar grocery store, Mr. Walter slipped on a wet tile spot. No injuries, no broken bones, just a slight fall that stopped him for a few seconds. But that feeling of losing control was imprinted in his memory stronger than any physical pain. From that day, he started avoiding paved roads, then avoided walking in the afternoon, and gradually did not go out unless absolutely necessary. The chair near the window is used more than the pair of walking shoes next to the cabinet. He told himself that he was right to be cautious, that after a certain age, falling was a scary thing. But what he didn't notice was that the more he sat, the weaker his muscles became, the poorer his balance was, and the less his heart and lungs exercised. Each time he stood up from his chair, it became more difficult. His steps became slower. And the irony was that he did not stop because he was weak, but he grew weaker because he stopped. No one told him that the body after the age of 80 is not like a machine that needs to rest, but like a garden. If not cared for and watered regularly, it will wither on its own. An old friend, when visiting, half-jokingly said that he was more stable than many young people. So why didn't he walk more? That statement made Mr. Walter think for many days. And then one morning, instead of reading the newspaper by the door, he tried walking around the block again. At first, it was only a few hundred meters, then it got longer with each passing day. He bought a cane with a sturdy handle to help him feel more confident, chose shoes with good soles, and most importantly, he began to regain the feeling of trust in his own feet. Not to step away, but to remind the body that it is still used, still needed. Gradually, not only did he walk more steadily, but his spirit also improved. Every step becomes a message to the brain that he is still present, still alive, still moving with the flow of life, slowly but without stopping. Looking back on his past journey, Mr. Walter did not change his life thanks to a miracle, nor did he rely on complex medical interventions or any special therapy. He simply began to notice the little things that were missing and gradually brought them back into his life. One meaningful thing to do every morning, a familiar greeting when walking past the corner, an honest conversation about pain that has never been spoken before. A little morning light quietly touches the skin and eyes, a slow but steady step. It was those seemingly small things that in turn pulled him out of the gradually quiet life and brought him back to himself, an old person, but not withered, a body that is weaker than before, but still has a reason to live meaningfully every day. And the truth is, Mr. Walter is not a special case. The things that changed him could also be the things that change you or someone you love. Old age is not the end, but another chapter, a chapter that, if written with observation, connection, and the courage to not give up, can still be full of life, warmth, and joy. If this story touches you, leave a comment below, sharing one small thing you will start over today. Don't forget to like if you find this content useful and subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying inspiring stories like this. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I wish you or someone you love an old age that is not just long, but truly profound and worth living.